Okay.
Welcome to the Radio Horror Show tonight here at WCW, or catching us on the YouTube channel. Tonight with us, we're going to be talking about Shiver Me Timbers, one of the new public domain characters that's getting their own horror movies. And the director of that film is on the show with us now. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Paul Stephen Mann. I'm the director of and writer of Shiver Me Timbers, the horror comedy Popeye film.
Were you like a big Popeye fan growing up that as soon as this became public
I know
domain,
the
you were
history
like,
of I am. Yes, I know the history of
okay.
Popeye very well.
Yeah, just celebrated his 80th anniversary just a couple of years ago to little to no fanfare.
And this is his 95th anniversary. And
Uh,
right now, that's why it's in the public domain.
right. So he's been around for 95 years. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought Popeye had been invented just a few years before Superman.
Superman was inspired by Popeye. The writers of Superman, I forget their name, Schuster and Siegel. They liked Popeye so much, with the spinach and the superpowers. They kind of based Superman, believe it or not, is where they got the idea from Popeye. Popeye was around first.
No, I figured Popeye was around first. I just didn't realize he went back to 1929. I thought he was invented in the 30s.
No, no, he first ever appeared in a Betty Boop cartoon, and he was part of the Thimble Theater comic strip in the newspapers.
Hmm. There's another report that says he was launched in 1919. Is that true?
I think that's Thimble Theater, and Oliver Oil was around before then.
Okay, gotcha. And then, of course, when I got to know Popeye, it was in the 80s when he was the mascot for the chain of restaurants, the St.
I
Louis chicken restaurants.
know Popeyes, yes.
We have
Yeah,
a bunch of them here in the area now. They've really kind of popped up, no pun intended, everywhere.
yeah.
So, but they don't sell spinach. It's kind of strange. But I always thought Popeyes and Popeye, the Sailor Man, were tied together. And then years later, I never saw him in any of the commercials anymore. So I was really kind of curious about that. But I digress. When you knew this was about to become public domain, did you already have a script in mind? How did this whole process start? There's
Okay,
there's so
so
many of these films coming out about Winnie the Pooh and Cinderella, and Betty Boop's going to get a horror movie.
we okay, so we actually filmed this film back in 23,
Okay.
right? So it was kind of before or just roundabout when the whole public domain thing was about to burst with the
Mm-hmm.
Winnie the Pooh movie. We didn't know we were kind of doing it at the same time, and that was just out of the love of Popeye. Um, and obviously, since then, it's been the whole explosion of public domain horror. Um, and we shot it very quickly. We shot the whole thing in 10 days. Um, and like I said, we didn't take it seriously. We wanted to give it a bit more of a trauma, toxic Avenger feel,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more crazy, a little bit. What we wanted to do was create a fun movie. We wanted horror fans to go in there, especially guys that love the 80s, women and everybody that loves the 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
we wanted them to come in and go, that was a great fun 80s style nod to the genre.
What's the basic plot line of your Popeye movie, so we don't spoil too much of it? And
Okay.
I'm assuming he's. I mean, from what I saw in the trailer, he looks like Popeyes. He looks like Popeye. Sorry, not Popeyes. Popeye.
Yeah, well, we changed him up a little because even though he's falling out of copyright, there's still a lot of trademarks to protect him.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't sure whether or not the spinach would be allowed because that was done years later. That was
Mm.
done for the war to make kids eat their spinach when people were, they needed to, people didn't have money because of the war. So
Okay.
they could grow spinach. So they made Popeye the mascot for spinach. Prior to that, he got his powers originally by off this rooster that if you petted it, it gave you powers. And that's how he meets Olive Oil. Castor Oil, who's Olive Oil's brother, hires Popeye as a sailor to go find this magical rooster. That's called Bernice. So what our story is, it takes place in 1986 during the Halley's Comet, because that was the last time Halley's Comet was we could see it. And a meteor from Halley's Comet turns our old man Popeye into this monstrous killing machine, and goes on the rampage and takes down all these little kids that are, well, teenagers that are partying and camping who are there to watch the meteor shower. One of those people is Olive Oil and her brother Castor. And that's the basic story, you know. There's not much to it. There's like 20 minutes of who everybody is, and then it's full on till the end of the movie, kills and violence in a comedy way.
So you said you filmed this a couple of years ago. What were you working on prior to that?
I've been working on mainly, I'm a former special effects guy who used to do a lot of commercial and stuff in Los Angeles and stuff, even though I'm Scottish.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and prior to that, I was doing mainly a lot of British television, you know, we're just working in British TV, whatever. You know, I was a gun for hire.
Anything in particular that we would know?
No, 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 not in the genre.
Well, I mean, I watch a little bit more than just the typical kind of like, horror movie stuff. So anything that
No, no, no. I would say television. Uh, I was kind of the guy that they came to if they needed something done quickly. It could be anything from the news to the Commonwealth Games, you know, opening packages for big sporting events, what have you. I
Mhm.
was doing a lot of that. Prior to that, when I was living in the States, I was doing a lot of horror. I did some stuff for the Power Rangers back in the day. I did stuff like the Trance movie with Martin Cove, Bruce Abbott. But that was back a while ago.
When you're making one of these films that's based on something that used to be, I don't even know who owned Popeye prior to it becoming public domain.
Well, the same people still own him. The big difference between Popeye and a lot of the other public domain characters is characters like Winnie the Pooh and Peter Pan. There's been many versions of that prior to the ones we know from Disney or whoever did it. So, you know, there's a lot more freedom when they go into the public domain, as
Mhm.
long as you don't step on Disney's toes. With Popeye, he's only ever been owned by the one people's, you know, the one company, much like Superman's only ever been owned by DC. So it's a little bit more complicated when you're dealing with a character like that. Um, you have to be a little bit more careful, which is why our Popeye doesn't look like the typical sailor Popeye, and we had to be, you know, we were just being careful. Um, does that kind of answer the question a little?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the, I mean, there was a book that just went public domain. I think around the time of the pandemic, and I heard they were going to do a vampire movie based on the idea, and it was the one that made the most sense to me. They said, "Oh, they're going to do Great Gatsby, but as a vampire," and I was like, "That makes complete sense." Like,
Yeah,
out of
yeah, yeah.
all these to do, that's the one that makes a lot of sense to do as a vampire because the Great Gatsby being this recluse and he has these parties at night, and then he meets this like one human. Maybe he wants to help him regain his humanity, and the humans like related to this like looks like this lost love from his time when he was human. I don't know whatever happened to that, but I think that would be really cool.
That
And
would be
we've
really
had
cool.
like 1,000 versions of Dracula, of course, and Sherlock Holmes, and of course now Sherlock Holmes is completely and utterly public domain. I didn't realize it wasn't 100% public domain; it was only a little bit public domain, and now it's the entire franchise is public domain.
Well, Sherlock Holmes was invented in Scotland. He's from the city I live in.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was Scottish.
I think so. Ali was, yeah, he lived here in Edinburgh. Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
I'm familiar with a lot of the stories of Sherlock Holmes, not as much about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but I guess everything needs a new interpretation. Heck, the last time we had a Popeyes movie was that uh, the Robin Williams film in the '80s.
Robert Altman, I believe, did that one. I think it was it him?
Oh
Um,
yeah, I don't know anything about much about the film other than Robin Williams played Popeye.
yeah, I remember that film.
Um, what are who plays your Popeye?
We have two people playing it. So before he gets transformed, we have David Hallows, who plays the old man, Popeye, who then turns into Anthony Greer, Big Tony, who then plays the muscle-bound monster.
Talk about some of the like the is it like a makeup effect suit? Is it just a
No,
lot
no,
of
it's a combination. Due to the schedule and everything, we we made the decision to go more with we did a lot of post work on Popeye,
mhm.
but a lot of the special effects makeup is in the kills. Like the prosthetics and stuff are mainly in the kills. We went all out on the kills.
What were some of your without giving too much away for the film, which comes out in April? What are a couple of your favorite kills and how were they done?
Well,
without naming names, let's say.
there's a fact I don't want to tell you because that's the whole film, really. Um, there's like five, seven, five. Oh gosh, I've lost. It's been so long. Five kills, I think, and we tried to get as graphic as we could. Let's just say that we went through vats of blood. We had fire extinguishers, paint sprayers, super soakers, all on one person. You've seen the trailer. That's just a sample. There's a lot of blood, and we tried to give them a little bit of humor.
Mhm.
I can't tell you because I don't want to ruin the film. But we injected comedy into the kills too, even though they're mightily graphic.
Gotcha. Isn't there another Popeye horror movie coming out called like Popeye's Revenge?
There's a couple more. Yeah.
Yeah, I.
The difference between those and ours is those are very much like the Winnie the Pooh film. They're very serious,
Mhm.
proper horror. Ours, like I say, we've gone with the Lloyd Kaufman way. We're trauma meets, we wanted to have a bit, we want people not to come in and go, that wasn't good. At least they walk out going, that was fun.
There's the big budget, which is kind of shocking to think about, but the big budget remake of the Toxic Avenger finally comes out this year.
I can't
Um,
wait.
yeah, with Peter Dinklage playing the Toxic Avenger, so
That's
that should
right.
be really good. They just launched the Toxic Avenger comic book, and then the video game should be out in April finally. The
Huh?
Toxic Crusaders, which is like a
Yes.
side scroller beat 'em up like Ninja Turtles or X Men, the old classic arcade Fist of Fury,
Yeah.
smash across the
I can't
screen.
wait. I can't wait for all that.
They should definitely put a lot of these horror IP characters together in some kind of like video game or something that have just become, like these public domain characters. That would be
I
rather
think
interesting.
Personally, I think that's the next step is you're going to see a lot of these characters in games and stuff. I think that's going to happen. It's inevitable.
I know Winnie the Pooh's doing a crossover with somebody coming up.
They're
I
doing
heard
like,
that.
yeah, but those films have a very serious tone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you wanted to go straight up comedy.
well, it's not straight up comedy. It's more like we've all seen The Toxic Avenger, the
Yeah,
original.
yeah, like a dark comedy with like
Yeah,
silly, like silly, what's the movie that's in theaters right now? Jack Quaid Companion.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's an artificial intelligence sex robot that kind of goes a little haywire, and it becomes like a very kind of dark comedy as they use the robot to try and kill off a couple people, but she becomes more self-aware of like what she's doing is not quite right, and her controller is just using her to have sex with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as Jack Wade from The
Okay, I
Boys,
like Jack
yeah,
Wade.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's in theaters right now. That's I'm like they need to make more dark comedies like this that are just very um not so just like it's a ha ha ha, but it's like it's funny, ridiculous humor, kind of like uh The Blackening, which is another kind of like dark comedy,
Okay.
kind of a spin on slashers, but they're very all black cast and things like that.
Oh, I know the film. I know the film, The
Yeah,
Blackening.
I
Yeah,
thought that was very clever as well.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
a black comedy, or that's the
I
pun,
get
but
it.
it's a dark
The
comedy.
pun.
Yes. As we play music on this show, does your film have a score or a soundtrack?
It will, and the soundtrack actually comes out in about 2 weeks. It'll be available on um, all the streaming services, iTunes, everywhere. Um, and it's pure rock and roll well, actually, that's not. The theme song is pure kind of rock. You've heard it. It's in the trailer.
Uh-huh.
Um, but most of that film is synthesizers, like the 80s. I mean, we tried to replicate the 80s. It takes place in the 80s. They're all dressed like the 80s. It's a period piece, and
Right.
all the music is synthesizers, like used to be when you used to go to the video store and rent a video from the 80s. You remember all these horror films that were
Mhm.
coming out back then. That's what we're trying to replicate.
Um, the song "Popeye the Sailor Man" that's copywritten, huh?
Can't use that. No way, man. Shut us down.
You gotta just make up a parody version of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't go there because they're on it. We've already talked to their lawyers.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Do you have to run this film by them?
No, because we hired a lawyer before we
Okay,
did it. So when I wrote the script, the first thing we did is what can and what can't we do? And I personally knew about the spinach. I still don't know the ins and outs of the spinach, but we didn't even take the risk. And his look is trademarked.
yeah,
So which will stop people making films like Superman and all that, because you won't be able to use the red and blue suits
yeah.
and
You won't be
stuff.
able to use the S.
Yeah. So That's why we went with more of a Rambo quality to our Popeye.
Hmm. Kind of reminds me of when you mentioned Superman. There was a film came out years ago, many years. Oh my God, like 18 years ago at this point, called Hollywoodland. It's the story of George Reeves, but it's not made by
That's
Warner
with
Brothers.
Brendan. Was that with Brendan Fraser?
No, Ben Affleck played
Ben
George.
Affleck, sorry.
So Ben played George, and in the marketing and the posters, they could not use the S shield. They had to call it superhuman actor of superhero. Sorry, not just
Yeah,
superhero. Superhero
trademarks.
actor played is killed. As like the poster had the newspaper of George, being killed or dying or suicide. But in the movie itself, they were allowed to use the S. Warner Brothers
Yes.
cleared the S in the film, but not in the marketing.
So we were told we couldn't even use the word Popeye in the title because they have a trademark for movies.
Right. And
So
there's
I
again,
don't.
there's Popeye's Revenge coming out. So
So maybe the Popeye people just don't care. I don't know.
yeah.
Um, but we just didn't want to take any chances.
Mhm.
But I mean, I don't know when those other films are coming out.
Right. I think later this year. Do you have
Okay.
another idea for a different kind of IP that's being now public domain that you want us to
Well,
do a film about?
what I will tell you is our film sets up the sequel,
Okay.
and we are going to come back with more friends, all of
Should
our
there, so there'll be a sequel. It would be called Shiver Me Two Embers, Shiver
Shiver Me
Two
Timbers
Flames.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, something like
Well,
that.
or something else. Maybe I'll have a subtitle. But I want you to understand, I don't want hardcore horror fans to come into this thinking they're getting a scary horror film. That is not what this is. This is, it could have, it will appeal to the guys from the 80s. It's peppered with 80s references. Even the trailers, people are picking up on the trailer of the two references, which I'll tell you right now because people have already picked up on it. It's on all the forums and stuff. If you're in the trailer where he goes, "Give me some sugar, baby."
Mhm.
Right before that, she's smoking a cigarette, and the ash on the end of the cigarette is getting longer and
Mhm.
longer. And he looks at it and tells her to ash. And then he says, "Give me some sugar, baby." That was Ash Williams' famous line from Army of Darkness.
Gotcha.
The license plate on the car is the same license plate as the one in Nightmare on Elm Street. So the whole film is peppered with stuff like that. So we're making it for horror fans to
Mhm.
come in, have a good time, a laugh. And most of the people that have seen it in the tests loved it. And the two words we get are fun and ridiculous.
That's good. That's good. Well, hey,
Yeah.
Paul, when you said the film comes out in April, where are going to people be able to find it?
I think it's going to be on all your streaming services. We've got a deal with Gravitas Ventures in the States. So I think you'll be able to get it on iTunes and anywhere you purchase your download, your movies.
Will there
It'll
be
be.
a will there be a theatrical release?
I know that Marco, our sales agent, is pushing for a theatrical release, but I don't know. There is going to be a theatrical release in other countries. Like I know it's actually going to the theater in Pakistan, out of all places, which is kind of crazy. Um, but we don't know. Each region has its own whatever.
Okay.
It's going to the theater in that country. In America, North America, I think it's on pay-per-view initially, and then it'll probably there was talk of it going to Peacock or something
Mhm.
after that. It might still, we never know, it might get a limited release, who knows? Um, and then it's going to the European film market in Berlin in a couple of weeks to get all the European dates locked up.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about your film, Shiver Me Timbers.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.